On Kepler 442b. Jonathan Blake had been pretending to be a loyal Dominion factory supervisor for 23 years. He managed ore refinement operations, submitted weekly production reports, and attended mandatory cultural assimilation meetings. The Dominion considered him a model example of a successfully integrated human. They had no idea he was one of Earth's most decorated special operations commanders. When his quantum transceiver activated, Blake felt the familiar rush of combat preparation flood his system. He looked around the factory floor where 300 humans worked under Dominion oversight. Each of them felt their hidden transceivers activate simultaneously. The quantum network didn't just carry information, it carried coordination protocols that had been refined over decades of planning. Every resistance cell received specific targets, timing sequences, and tactical assignments. Blake's factory had been selected for Operation Sledgehammer, the simultaneous destruction of every Dominion industrial facility in human space. Blake walked calmly to his office terminal and entered a maintenance code that had been waiting 47 years to be used. Throughout the factory, hidden explosives that had been built into the original construction began their activation sequence, but the explosives weren't the real weapon. They were just the distraction on the factory floor. The human workers began moving with purpose that surprised the Dominion overseers. Sarah Chun, who had worked the same assembly line for 15 years, suddenly revealed herself as a demolitions expert. Marcus Volkov, the quiet maintenance worker, activated electromagnetic pulse devices hidden in every major system within 90 seconds. Every Dominion facility on Kepler 442b was offline. The same scene played out simultaneously across human space. On New Shanghai, David Park stepped out of his role as a colonial administrative clerk and revealed hidden weapons caches that had been smuggled piece by piece over decades. On Avalon Station, Dr. Rebecca Torres stopped treating Dominion injuries and started treating the resistance fighters emerging from the civilian population. The Dominion had made a fundamental error in their occupation strategy. They had assumed that resistance would come from obvious places, military installations, government buildings, known dissidents. They had never considered that every human world was already a military installation, with every civilian trained and equipped for the day when the signal finally came on the orbital command station above New Shanghai. Admiral Kethver of the Dominion Navy watched his tactical display with growing horror. Red alerts were cascading across every system under his command. Not random attacks, coordinated, simultaneous strikes that displayed impossible levels of planning and preparation. "Sir," his communication officer reported, "we're receiving distress calls from 47 systems simultaneously. Industrial facilities, communication arrays, defense platforms, everything is under attack." "That's impossible," Admiral Kethver snarled. "Humans don't have the capability for coordinated operations across interstellar distances. Their communication networks are under our control." What Admiral Kethver didn't understand was that humans had never needed the Dominion's communication networks. The quantum entanglement transceivers created instantaneous connections that bypassed every known form of detection or interception. More importantly, the Dominion had never understood human psychology. They saw the scattered resistance attacks over the decades and assumed they were dealing with random, isolated groups. They had never realized that every failed resistance operation had been intelligence gathering. Every captured rebel had been a volunteer feeding information back to Earth through channels the Dominion couldn't detect for 47 years. Humans had been mapping every Dominion weakness while appearing completely defeated. On Earth itself, the response was equally swift. In the hidden command centers beneath the planet's devastated surface, General Sarah Chun, sister to the late Tommy Chen, watched tactical displays that showed the liberation of human space proceeding exactly according to the Iron Protocol. "Admiral Harrison," she spoke into her quantum communicator, "Phase 2 is authorized. 5 light years away." Admiral James Harrison emerged from the asteroid field where the Earth Defense Fleet had been hiding for nearly 5 decades. 47 years of apparent defeat had been 47 years of preparation. Hidden shipyards and dead systems had been producing vessels using technology the Dominion had never suspected humans possessed. The Dominion had conquered human space, but they had never conquered human innovation. While they celebrated their victory, human engineers had been developing weapon systems that would make their eventual response overwhelming and decisive. Harrison's fleet consisted of 300 ships that officially didn't exist. Each one was equipped with weaponry that had been developed specifically to counter Dominion advantages. The aliens had superior shields. Human weapons used quantum disruption that bypassed energy barriers entirely. The Dominion had faster ships. Human vessels carried jump drives that could cross multiple systems in minutes. All ships, Harrison broadcast, you are authorized to engage. Remember New Geneva. Remember the boys. The fleet dispersed across human space with a speed that stunned Dominion forces. But the ships weren't the main weapon. They were command and control platforms for assets that had been hidden in every system for decades on Tau Ceti Prime. The Dominion garrison commander received reports of human uprising just as the ground beneath his base began to shake. The mining operations that had been extracting resources for the Dominion had also been placing charges in the planet's crust. Not enough to destroy the world, but enough to trigger localized geological disasters that would bury every Dominion installation. The humans had learned that they didn't need to match Dominion military power directly. They just needed to eliminate the aliens' ability to project that power across space. Commander Zachther, still standing in the plaza on New Geneva where 5 boys lay dead, watched his command structure collapse around him. His orbital platforms were destroyed. His communication with Fleet Command was severed. His ground forces were being systematically eliminated by humans who seemed to know exactly where every Dominion soldier was stationed. "This is impossible," he said to his surviving officers. "These are primitive beings. They have no organization, no leadership structure. How are they coordinating across multiple star systems?" His answer came from Maria Santos, who still stood beside her son's body. She held up her personal communicator, which was now glowing with quantum energy. "You spent 47 years studying our technology," she said, "but you never bothered to understand our hearts. You thought conquering our governments meant conquering our people. You never realized that every human you allowed to live was a weapon waiting to be activated. The truth was that the Iron Protocol had been more than a resistance plan, it had been a test. Earth's military leadership had needed to know if humanity could act as one species when faced with extinction. The test required allowing the Dominion to believe they had won completely, then waiting for the moment when their true nature would be revealed. That moment had come when they executed children. On Proxima Centauri, the Dominion's regional capital, Governor Hessek watched his advisors panic as reports flooded in. Every world in the sector was in open revolt. Not chaotic uprising, but coordinated military operations that demonstrated planning and preparation far beyond what the Dominion had believed humans capable of. "Sir," his intelligence chief reported, "we're detecting quantum communication signatures across all human worlds. They have technology we've never encountered before." "Impossible," Governor Hessek replied. "We control all their manufacturing. We monitor all their research. They couldn't have developed anything without our knowledge." The governor was wrong. The technology wasn't new, it was older than the Dominion's presence in human space. Earth scientists had anticipated the need for hidden communication networks decades before the invasion. Every personal device carried by humans contained components that served dual purposes, activated only when specific biological triggers were detected. The execution of 5 innocent children in front of their families had created exactly those triggers on New Geneva. The fighting was over within 2 hours. Commander Zachther and his surviving forces had been eliminated not by superior firepower, but by superior knowledge. The humans had known the location of every Dominion soldier, every supply cache, every escape route. Maria Santos walked through the liberated plaza carrying her son's body. Around her, other families retrieved their dead children. But they weren't mourning, they were completing a ceremony that had been planned for decades. "The signal has been sent," she announced to the gathering crowd. "Earth knows what happened here. The Dominion will answer for these deaths." What the Dominion was learning across dozens of star systems was that they had never actually conquered humanity. They had conquered human governments, human military forces, human industrial capacity, but they had never conquered the human capacity for patience. Planning and coordinated action, the Iron Protocol, had required the greatest sacrifice in human history, allowing an entire generation to grow up under alien occupation while preparing for a single moment of coordinated response. The execution of 5 boys. 3 hours after the execution of 5 boys on New Geneva, Supreme Chancellor Vorthak of the Dominion Empire sat in his throne room on the capital world of Zafia, staring at reports that defied everything he understood about warfare, politics, and the nature of conquered species. In less than 180 minutes, the Dominion had lost control of every human world simultaneously. Not gradually, not through prolonged campaigns, but in a coordinated uprising that demonstrated strategic planning beyond anything in galactic military history. "Your Supremacy," his chief military advisor trembled. "The humans have eliminated 97% of our forces in their territories. Our remaining ships are requesting permission to retreat to Dominion space." Chancellor Vorthak's 4 eyes focused on the tactical display showing the collapse of an empire that had taken 3 centuries to build. The humans hadn't just rebelled, they had executed a military operation so precise that it eliminated Dominion presence in their space without significant damage to infrastructure or civilian populations. How? He demanded. Our intelligence services reported complete pacification. No organized resistance. No military capability. How did a broken species coordinate action across thousands of light years? The answer came from an unexpected source. On the primary communication screen, a human appeared, not as a supplicant or prisoner, but as an equal addressing another head of state. "Supreme Chancellor," the woman said, "I am General Sarah Chun, acting commander of the Earth Defense Consortium. I'm transmitting from Earth's primary command center to formally notify you that human space is no longer under Dominion control." Vorthak studied the image. The human appeared middle-aged by their standards, with graying hair and eyes that showed both intelligence and something he had never seen in a conquered species: absolute confidence. "Impossible," he replied. "Earth is a dead world. We destroyed your civilization 47 years ago." "You destroyed our governments," General Chun corrected. "You occupied our worlds. You never destroyed our civilization. What you witnessed today was not a rebellion, Chancellor. It was the completion of a plan that began before your forces ever entered our space." The Supreme Chancellor's scaled hands gripped his throne. This human spoke as if addressing an equal, not a superior. Worse, the tactical evidence suggested she might be right to do so. "What do you want?" he asked. "Justice," Chun replied simply. "You executed 5 children on New Geneva for the crime of trying to feed hungry families. That action triggered a response protocol that has been dormant for 47 years. Every world you controlled in human space is now free. Every Dominion military asset in our territory has been destroyed or captured." On Zephyria, Chancellor Vorthak's military council exchanged worried glances. The humans weren't demanding tribute or territory. They were stating facts about accomplished objectives. "This is temporary," the Chancellor declared. "The Dominion controls 3,000 worlds. Humanity occupies perhaps 200 systems. We will mobilize the Grand Fleet and—" "No," General Chun interrupted. "You won't." The primary display changed to show tactical images from across Dominion space. Every major military shipyard was burning. Every fleet base showed signs of sabotage. Supply convoys were disappearing throughout the Empire. "You see, Chancellor, humans didn't just live on the worlds you conquered. We were present throughout your empire as slaves, servants, technical specialists, and laborers. When the Iron Protocol activated, it reached every human in the galaxy simultaneously. The truth was staggering in its implications. For nearly 5 decades, the Dominion had been incorporating human knowledge and skills into their infrastructure. Human engineers had helped design their ships. Human technicians had maintained their computers. Human workers had processed their supplies. All of them had been resistance assets waiting for activation. On the industrial world of Kepler 186F, which served as a major shipbuilding center for the Dominion Navy, Chief Engineer Robert Kim had spent 30 years appearing to be a loyal technical specialist. In reality, he had been introducing subtle flaws into every vessel produced at the facility. When the protocol activated, those flaws became active. Across the Dominion fleet, ships began experiencing simultaneous system failures as hidden programming activated. Weapons systems locked out their users. Navigation computers began broadcasting false coordinates. Life support systems failed on command ships. The Dominion was learning that their empire had been infiltrated at every level by humans who appeared completely assimilated but had actually been gathering intelligence and preparing sabotage for decades. This is unprecedented, Chancellor Vorthak's science advisor whispered. They've managed to coordinate action across the entire galaxy. The logistics alone should be impossible. But humans had never approached the problem of resistance as the Dominion expected. Instead of trying to match alien military power directly, they had focused on understanding and exploiting Dominion weaknesses. The aliens' greatest strength, their vast, complex empire, had also become their greatest vulnerability. The more they incorporated human labor into their infrastructure, the more humans learned about their systems and capabilities. General Chung continued her transmission from Earth. Your empire was built on the assumption that conquest equals control. You believe that destroying our governments meant destroying our ability to resist. You never understood that human loyalty isn't to governments or territories, it's to each other. The execution of 5 boys had triggered something more profound than military retaliation. It had activated the deepest human instinct, the protection of children. Every human in the galaxy, regardless of their official status, had felt the quantum-transmitted emotional signature of that atrocity on Tau Ceti Prime. Dr. Anna Kowalski had been serving as medical advisor to the Dominion Colonial Administration. When the protocol activated, she stopped treating Dominion injuries and began treating the human resistance fighters who emerged from hiding, but more importantly, she activated medical nanobots that had been secretly distributed through the Dominion food supply over decades. The nanobots were harmless to humans, but caused severe neurological disruption in Dominion physiology across their empire. Dominion commanders began experiencing confusion, memory loss, and motor skill deterioration. Not enough to kill, but enough to eliminate their ability to coordinate military responses. You poisoned us, Chancellor Vorthak realized, his speech beginning to slur as the nanobots reached his system. We neutralized your ability to commit further atrocities, General Chun corrected. The effects are temporary and non-lethal. Your military leadership will recover completely once they agree to negotiate in good faith. The Supreme Chancellor struggled to focus his vision. Around his throne room, Dominion officials were experiencing similar effects. Their empire's command structure was paralyzed not by weapons, but by medical technology they had never detected. What? What are your terms? He managed to ask. Complete withdrawal from all human space, Chun replied. Recognition of human sovereignty. Reparations for 47 years of occupation. And formal apology for the execution of Tommy Chun, Marcus Williams, Aidan O'Brien, Jamal Hassan, and Diego Santos. The Chancellor realized he was negotiating from a position of complete powerlessness. The humans had demonstrated that they could cripple his empire at will, but they were choosing to negotiate rather than destroy. Why not simply eliminate us? He asked. You clearly have the capability. General Chin's expression softened slightly. Because we're not you, Chancellor. We don't execute children to prove our power. We don't conquer other species for resources we could obtain through trade. We fight when we must, but we prefer to build. The truth was that the Iron Protocol had always been designed as a defensive measure, not an aggressive one. Humanity had never wanted to rule the galaxy, they had simply wanted to be left alone to develop and explore in peace. The execution of 5 boys had triggered the protocol because it represented the one thing humans could never tolerate, the deliberate killing of innocents to demonstrate power on New Geneva. Maria Santos stood in the memorial garden that had been built around the spot where her son died. The bodies of the 5 boys had been buried with full honors, their names carved into monuments that would remind future generations of the price of freedom. Around her, the planet was rebuilding, but it wasn't returning to its previous state, it was becoming something new. The trauma of occupation had been transformed into determination to ensure such atrocities could never happen again. Admiral Harrison's fleet had established orbital defenses around every human world. But the real protection came from the quantum communication network that would ensure no human community would ever again face extermination while others remained unaware. 3 weeks after the execution, Chancellor Vorthak signed the Treaty of New Geneva, formally ending Dominion control over human space. The ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy, showing a defeated empire formally apologizing to the families of 5 boys whose deaths had triggered the largest military reversal in galactic history, but the treaty was more than an end to occupation. It was the beginning of a new model for galactic civilization. The humans had demonstrated that cooperation based on mutual respect was more powerful. The morning sun cast long shadows across the central plaza of New Geneva, a human colony world that had known peace for exactly 47 years. Children played near the fountain while their parents conducted daily business, unaware that this would be the last normal day in galactic history. Commander Zachther of the Dominion's 3rd Fleet stood on the raised platform, his forearms crossed behind his chitinous back as he surveyed the gathering crowd. The purple-skinned alien's compound eyes reflected no emotion as his soldiers herded more humans into the square. Today would send a message that would echo across every world under Dominion control. Citizens of this inferior species. Zachther's voice boomed through the translation devices mounted throughout the plaza. You have harbored criminals. 5 of your young attempted to steal food from our supply depot. Such defiance cannot be tolerated. Maria Santos felt her heart stop as the soldiers dragged 5 boys onto the platform. Her son Diego was among them, barely 16 years old, his dark eyes wide with terror. The other boys ranged from 14 to 17, Tommy Chun, Marcus Williams, Aidan O'Brien, and Jamal Hassan. They had been caught taking emergency rations to feed families, whose food allowances had been cut again. The crowd stirred uneasily. These weren't hardened criminals. They were children trying to help hungry neighbors. Dr. Elizabeth Reeves, the colony's chief medical officer, stepped forward from the crowd. Commander, please. They're just boys. They were trying to help starving families. Surely we can work out some form of community service. A plasma bolt from a Dominion Guard's weapon silenced her permanently. Dr. Reeves collapsed, smoke rising from the cauterized hole in her chest. The crowd gasped and stepped back, but something dangerous flickered in their eyes. Anyone else wish to speak for these criminals? Zachther asked, his mandibles clicking with amusement. The boys stood with their hands bound behind their backs, forced to their knees on the cold metal platform. Diego caught his mother's eye and mouthed, I love you. Tommy Chun's younger sister sobbed in the crowd. Marcus Williams' grandfather, a veteran of the border wars, stood rigid with barely contained fury. What the Dominion had never understood about humans was the depth of their bonds. They saw the scattered colonies as conquered territories filled with useful labor. They didn't recognize that every human settlement was connected by invisible threads of communication, commerce, and kinship that spanned the galaxy. Let this be a lesson, Zachther announced, drawing his ceremonial plasma sword. Defiance brings death. The first boy to die was Tommy Chun. The 14-year-old had been trying to get medicine for his diabetic little sister. The plasma blade sliced cleanly through his neck. His head rolled across the platform as his body crumpled. Marcus Williams was next. 17 years old, planning to study engineering. He had taken the rations to feed his pregnant neighbor. The sword found his heart. Aidan O'Brien, 16, red-haired and freckled, had been the group's lookout. He had stayed behind to make sure the others escaped, sacrificing himself for his friends. The blade took him at the waist. Jamal Hassan, 15, the son of refugees who had fled the Outer Rim conflicts. He died with a prayer on his lips, calling to a god the Dominion had tried to stamp out. Finally, Diego Santos, Maria's only child, the boy who had organized the food theft because he couldn't stand watching his neighbor's children cry from hunger. Zacthar saved him for last, savoring the mother's anguish. "Any final words, young criminal?" the commander asked. Diego raised his head, blood from a beating streaming down his face. "Earth remembers," he whispered. The blade fell as Diego's body hit the platform. Something unprecedented happened. In the crowd, every human wearing a personal communicator, and that was nearly everyone, felt their devices activate simultaneously. Not with a call or message, but with something else entirely. The activation wasn't random. Hidden within the personal communicators that every human carried was technology that the Dominion had never discovered. Quantum entanglement transceivers, so small and so perfectly disguised as standard components that 47 years of occupation had never revealed them. These devices had been installed by the Earth Defense Consortium before the Dominion's invasion, part of a deep cover resistance network called the Iron Protocol. For nearly 5 decades, they had remained dormant, waiting for a specific signal. The signal wasn't electronic. It was biological human stress hormones. When reaching critical levels across multiple individuals in close proximity, created a unique quantum signature. The transceivers were programmed to recognize this signature, the specific pattern that indicated not just fear or anger, but the witnessing of an injustice so profound that it demanded response. The execution of 5 innocent boys in front of their families and neighbors had created exactly that signature. Maria Santos felt her communicator grow warm against her chest. Around the plaza, hundreds of other humans felt the same thing. They didn't understand what was happening, but they felt it, a connection. A shared awareness that something fundamental had changed. On New Geneva's orbital communication station, automated systems suddenly came alive. Quantum transmitters that had been disguised as standard Dominion equipment for decades revealed their true purpose. In microseconds, they connected to similar hidden transmitters on every human world, creating an instantaneous network spanning thousands of light years. The signal that went out was simple: 5 children, innocent, executed, location confirmed. But it carried with it something more: the quantum-encoded emotional signature of every human who had witnessed the atrocity. On Earth itself, deep beneath the ruins of Geneva, servers that had waited 47 years suddenly activated. The Iron Protocol was older than the Dominion's occupation, older than their knowledge of human space. It had been designed by people who understood that humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology or its weapons, it was its ability to act as one. When pushed too far, the servers began calculating every Dominion military installation, every occupation force, every colonial administrator, every supply depot, communication relay, and command center in human space. The data had been gathered slowly, carefully, over decades by humans who appeared to be collaborators but were actually intelligence assets. Within 90 seconds of Diego Santos' death, the complete tactical picture of Dominion forces in human space was assembled and transmitted to resistance cells that most humans didn't even know existed. Back in the plaza, Commander Zacthar noticed the humans acting strangely. They weren't fleeing or cowering as expected. Instead, they stood quietly, their faces showing something he had never seen before, not just anger, but certainty. "Disperse," he ordered the crowd. "Return to your homes." No one moved. "I said disperse." Zacthar's voice rose. His guards raised their weapons. That was when Maria Santos stepped onto the platform where her son's body lay. She knelt beside Diego and closed his eyes, then stood to face the commander. "My son said something before you murdered him," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent plaza. "He said Earth remembers. Do you know what that means, Commander?" Zacthur's mandibles clicked nervously. The woman showed no fear, and the crowd behind her was absolutely still. Something was wrong. "It means," Maria continued, "that you just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. The first explosion came from the orbital defense platform above New Geneva. The massive structure, which had enforced Dominion control over the system for decades, suddenly erupted in a ball of expanding plasma. The shock wave rattled windows across the planet. Then came the second explosion, and the third. Across New Geneva's sky, Dominion ships began dying, but it wasn't just New Geneva. The quantum entanglement network carried more than information. It carried synchronized timing. At the exact same moment, on hundreds of worlds across human space, resistance cells that had been dormant for decades simultaneously activated. The Dominion had always wondered how humans could be so compliant for so long, then suddenly turned violent without warning. They had never understood that humans didn't see compliance and resistance as opposite states. They saw them as different phases of the same strategy. Commander. Zacthur stared at the burning sky above his head and realized that the execution of 5 boys had triggered something that would consume everything the Dominion had built in human space. In the plaza below, Maria Santos held her son's hand and smiled for the first time in years. The Iron Protocol was active. Earth had heard the signal. And now, the galaxy would learn why humanity had never truly been conquered, only waiting.